Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe so you won't miss the next story that might brighten your day. Snow slammed against the windshield as Nathaniel Hawthorne gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles. In the back seat, Emily cradled her feverish baby, whispering his name over and over as if her voice alone could anchor him to life. The city lights blurred past, sirens wailed in the distance, and for the first time in years, the billionaire CEO wasn't thinking about contracts, meetings, or empires. He was praying a child he barely knew would survive the night. His daughter's voice broke the silence. "Daddy, please don't let him die." And in that moment, Nathaniel realized this wasn't just about a sick baby or a stranger he'd found on a bench. It was about something bigger, something that would test every wall he had built around his heart. Snow fell in soft sheets over Manhattan, swirling in silver currents beneath the halo of street lamps. The city was alive with Christmas Eve wonder. Window displays sparkled with red ribbons and golden reindeer, choirs sang carols on Fifth Avenue, and children dragged parents toward the Rockefeller tree with wide, glowing eyes. But for Nathaniel Hawthorne, none of it mattered. He stepped out of his black Bentley with the same controlled grace he carried into every boardroom. His long charcoal coat swept against his tailored suit, polished shoes crunching on the snow. At 40, he was the kind of man who seemed carved from steel, every line of his jaw honed, every word he spoke measured. Yet beneath the surface, he carried an emptiness that no amount of wealth or power could silence. A small voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Daddy, hurry up." Emma, his 5-year-old daughter, bounded down from the car, boots sinking into the fresh snow. She wore a pink wool coat and a knit hat that nearly slipped over her eyes. Nathaniel caught her hand quickly, habit, instinct, fear of losing what little he had left. "We'll see the tree, then head home for Coco," Nathaniel said softly. Emma grinned, tugging him forward. Her laughter danced through the air, innocent and bright. But Nathaniel's smile was faint, shadowed by the ghost of a woman he had loved and buried 2 years earlier. He forced his attention back to Emma. Tonight was about her. As they strolled past shopfronts strung with golden lights, Emma chattered about Santa's sleigh, the cookies they should leave out, and how she hoped Rudolph wouldn't get too cold flying in the snow. Nathaniel nodded, his responses short, distracted. He was used to people seeing only his success, the empire of real estate and tech ventures, the penthouse in the clouds. Few noticed the grief stitched into every pause. Then Emma stopped. "Daddy," she whispered, pointing, "why is she sleeping there?" Nathaniel followed her gaze. At the edge of a bus stop, under the flicker of a broken neon sign, a young woman lay curled on a wooden bench. Snow clung to her tangled hair. Her sweater was thin, sleeves rolled up against arms shivering uncontrollably. She clutched something to her chest, rocking slightly even in sleep. Nathaniel squinted. It wasn't something, it was someone. A baby. The infant was wrapped in a frayed blanket, tiny fists trembling in the night air. His cheeks were flushed red from the cold. The woman's lips were bluish, her body sagging with exhaustion. Nathaniel's chest tightened, though he quickly straightened, forcing logic into place. This was New York. There were thousands of stories like this. He had his daughter to think of. His world didn't have room for strangers' burdens. "Come along, Emma," he said firmly, tugging her hand, but Emma didn't move. Her eyes were wide, shimmering with something he had long forgotten, unfiltered compassion. "She has a baby, Daddy," Emma said louder this time. "He's so little, he's freezing." Nathaniel inhaled sharply, snowflakes stinging his face. "Emma, we can't, please." Her voice cracked, small but insistent. "You always tell me to be kind. What if nobody helps them? What if that was me? Nathaniel froze. For a moment, all the noise of the city fell away. He saw only his daughter, her small hand gripping his, her eyes reflecting his own grief back at him. She wasn't asking for toys or trips or the impossible. She was asking him to be the man she believed he was. His throat tightened. Slowly, without a word, he unwrapped the soft red scarf from around Emma's neck. She didn't protest, just watched, breathless, as her father knelt beside the stranger. Nathaniel laid the scarf gently over the infant, careful not to wake him. The baby stirred, lips parting, but did not cry. The young woman's arms clutched tighter, even in sleep, as if her very soul depended on holding him close. Nathaniel touched her shoulder lightly. "Miss," he said, voice low but firm, "you can't stay out here tonight." No response. He leaned closer, urgency sharpening his tone. "Please, wake up." For a heartbeat, nothing. Then her lashes fluttered. Panic seized her features as she jolted awake, gasping. The cold struck her like a knife, and fear lit her eyes when she saw Nathaniel leaning over her. "Stay back," she rasped, pulling the bundle closer. "Don't touch him." Nathaniel lifted his hand slightly, calm but unyielding. "He's freezing, you both are." "I don't need your pity," she snapped, though her voice trembled. Emma tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, tell her we'll help." Nathaniel studied the woman, barely 20, hair matted, lips cracked. Her eyes were fierce despite the exhaustion, eyes that had fought too long without winning. The baby coughed weakly in her arms, and Nathaniel felt something crack inside him. "I'm not offering pity," he said quietly. "I'm offering warmth." The woman's throat bobbed as if swallowing down tears. "People only help when they want something back. I've learned that the hard way." Nathaniel exhaled slowly, snow swirling between them. He thought of the night he lost his wife, the silence that followed, the way people had either whispered empty sympathy or backed away entirely. He thought of Emma asking, "What if that was me?" He tightened his jaw. "You can come or not, but I'm not leaving a baby to freeze." For a moment, neither moved. Then she whispered, so faint he almost didn't hear it. "His name is Lucas." Emma's face softened. "Hi, Lucas," she said sweetly, as though introducing herself to a new friend. The woman blinked, startled by the child's innocence. Finally, she looked back at Nathaniel. His eyes weren't calculating or cold like the men she'd learned to distrust. They were steady, steady in a way that made her legs tremble with confusion. "I'm Emily," she whispered at last. Her voice cracked. "But I can't." "You can," Nathaniel interrupted gently. He extended his hand, not forcing, just waiting. "My car's right there." Emily's gaze darted from him to Emma to the Bentley parked at the curb. She had nothing, no coat, no safe place, no one who would notice if she vanished. But this man, this stranger with a daughter who looked at her with eyes like lanterns in the dark, was offering a sliver of warmth. She hesitated. Then, clutching Lucas tighter, Emily rose on shaky legs. Nathaniel didn't smile, but something in his chest shifted, loosening for the first time in years. He guided her carefully across the icy sidewalk, Emma skipping beside them. As the Bentley door closed and the heater roared to life, Emily sat rigid in the leather seat, eyes darting around as though the kindness might dissolve at any second. Nathaniel glanced at her through the rearview mirror, then at Emma, who beamed like she had just saved the world. Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing the city in silence. Inside, a fragile new story had begun, one none of them could have predicted. The Bentley's engine purred as it cut through the snow-glossed avenues of Manhattan. Inside, warmth replaced the biting cold, but tension lingered like a second frost. Nathaniel drove with his usual precision, one hand steady on the wheel, eyes flicking only briefly toward the rearview mirror. Emily sat stiffly in the back seat, Lucas clutched tightly to her chest as though the leather upholstery might swallow him whole. Emma leaned forward from her booster seat, curiosity sparking in her wide eyes. "What's his name again?" she asked softly. Emily blinked, startled by the child's eagerness. "Lucas," she whispered, brushing a pale hand over the baby's cheek. "Hi, Lucas," Emma said again, her voice bubbling like a secret shared. "I like your name. My name's Emma. I'm 5. Do you think he'll like hot cocoa? Daddy makes the best cocoa." Emily's lips twitched, the faintest hint of something between disbelief and longing. She looked toward Nathaniel, but his face was fixed forward, jaw sharp with restraint. The silence stretched until Emily, almost against her own will, filled it. Her voice was thin, brittle. I wasn't supposed to end up like this." Nathaniel's eyes shifted to the mirror. He didn't speak, but something in his gaze invited her to continue. "I grew up in Connecticut," Emily murmured, each word dragging against memory. "Quiet town, big church, stricter family than you can imagine. I was the girl who never missed Sunday service, the one who drew little sketches on the back of hymn books. My mom used to hide them because she said art was a waste of time." Emma tilted her head. "But you like to draw." Emily swallowed. "I loved it. Drawing was the only way the world made sense. I dreamed of going to art school, and somehow I got in. First in my family to ever step onto a college campus. I thought that meant something." Her eyes flicked down to Lucas, sleeping fitfully. "Then I met him. He told me I was brilliant, said my art could take me anywhere. I believed him, believed everything, until the test turned positive. And suddenly," her voice cracked. "Suddenly I wasn't brilliant anymore. I was a problem. My parents gave me a choice, keep the baby and leave, or stay and erase him like he never existed. I left with nothing, and the boy who promised forever, he disappeared before I even bought a crib." Emma's little mouth formed a small O. She turned to her father. "That's mean," she whispered fiercely. Nathaniel kept his eyes on the road, but his grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles paled. He had known betrayal, too, not of love, but of fate itself, when a car accident had ripped his wife away in an instant. He recognized the hollow tone in Emily's voice because he carried it in his own. Yet still he said nothing. Emily leaned back, pressing her cheek to Lucas's soft hair. "I tried shelters. I tried friends, but nobody wants a girl with a crying newborn in their apartment. Every night I told myself it was just until tomorrow, and then tomorrow became months. You stop being someone, you just survive." The car was quiet but for the muffled hum of the tires against slush. Emma's hand reached across the seat, small and certain. She touched Emily's sleeve gently. "You don't have to be alone now. Daddy takes care of people, don't you, Daddy?" Nathaniel's jaw flexed. For years he had poured his life into balance sheets and board meetings, convinced that taking care of Emma was enough, that anything more would only reopen wounds he couldn't afford. But Emma's voice, innocent and unwavering, left no space to hide. He cleared his throat. "You'll stay tonight, at least until Lucas is safe." Emily's head snapped up, suspicion clouding her eyes. Why would you help us?" Nathaniel's gaze caught hers in the mirror. "Because my daughter asked me to." The answer was blunt, maybe even cold, but something in his tone carried weight beyond words. Emily blinked rapidly, as if trying to stop tears before they betrayed her. The Bentley pulled up in front of the Hawthorne penthouse, its glass facade glowing against the night sky. As the doorman rushed forward, his eyes widened at the sight of Emily stepping out, clothes ragged, hair tangled, baby in her arms. Nathaniel offered no explanation, only a curt nod that silenced questions. Inside, marble floors gleamed under chandeliers. Emily's boots squeaked on polished stone. She flinched at every sound, her posture rigid, as though the very walls might judge her presence. Mrs. Whitmore, the longtime housekeeper, appeared from the hallway, lips pressed into a thin line. Her sharp gaze landed on Emily, then on the baby, then back to Nathaniel. "Sir, prepare the guest room," Nathaniel ordered. Mrs. Whitmore hesitated, then inclined her head. "Of course." But her eyes lingered, skeptical, before she disappeared down the hall. Emma skipped ahead, turning to wave. "Come on, Emily. I'll show you the nightlight in the guest room. It's shaped like the moon. Lucas will like it." Emily hesitated at the threshold, uncertainty pulling at her chest. But Emma's smile was a tether, drawing her forward one cautious step at a time. Nathaniel watched silently, hands in his pockets. Part of him wanted to demand answers, to know if Emily's story was true, to calculate the risks of letting a stranger into his world. Another part, the part he tried to silence, recognized the desperation in her eyes. It mirrored his own reflection after the funeral. For now, he let Emma lead. And as Emily disappeared down the corridor with his daughter, Nathaniel found himself wondering, for the first time in years, if fate had placed more than grief at his doorstep this Christmas Eve. The days after Christmas drifted like snowflakes outside Nathaniel Hawthorne's penthouse windows, quiet, slow, deceptively gentle. Emily still felt out of place in his world of crystal chandeliers and city views that seemed to stretch forever. Every corner of the home reminded her she didn't belong. The polished silverware, the grand piano no one touched, the smell of expensive leather that clung to the furniture. And yet there was Emma. Emma appeared in the mornings with wide eyes and messy braids, tugging Emily toward the sunroom as if she had been waiting her whole life to have a sister. "Come here," she said one morning, bouncing on her toes. "This used to be Daddy's reading place, but you can sit here. There are crayons in that box. Maybe you can draw something." Emily hesitated. She hadn't drawn in months. The streets had stripped away her pencils, her canvases, even her confidence. Survival didn't leave space for dreams, but Emma's smile, hopeful, expectant, was harder to resist than hunger itself. So Emily opened the box. Inside were old sketch pads, some nearly forgotten beneath layers of dust. She flipped to a blank page, heart racing as though she were breaking a law. Her fingers trembled when they wrapped around a pencil. But then, slowly, the tremor gave way to muscle memory. Lines curved, shadows deepened. When she finally looked down, there was Emma's face staring back at her, bright eyes, round cheeks, a grin wide enough to melt winter. Emma gasped, "That's me." She spun around, racing to find her father. "Daddy, come see what Emily did." Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, brows knit as if he'd been interrupted from some crisis. His eyes fell on the sketch, and for a moment his expression softened. "She's talented," he said, almost reluctantly. Emily flushed, uncertain whether to take it as praise or simple fact. "It's nothing, just a doodle." But Nathaniel's gaze lingered a second longer than necessary before he turned away. That week, Emily began to draw again. At night, when Lucas slept, she sketched the skyline from the penthouse balcony. During the day, she captured Emma twirling in the snow or Mrs. Whitmore bustling in the kitchen with her ever-present disapproving look. Each line brought back the girl she had been before life broke her. Still, whispers followed her. Mrs. Whitmore wasn't cruel, but she was cautious. "You must understand, miss," she said one evening as she folded linens. "This house has known its share of losses. Mr. Hawthorne doesn't let people in easily. Don't expect, she stopped herself, pressing her lips tight. Just don't expect too much. Emily nodded quietly, though her chest ached. 2 weeks later came the gala. Nathaniel had avoided parties since his wife's death, but this event was unavoidable. A charity benefit hosted by one of his largest investors. Emma begged to go, insisting Emily come too. Please, Daddy. Emily's never seen anything like it. Reluctantly, Nathaniel agreed. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and gold-trimmed drapes. Waiters glided through the crowd carrying trays of champagne. Women in gowns the color of jewels whispered behind jeweled hands. Emily wore a simple black dress Mrs. Whitmore had tailored to fit her. She had never looked more out of place. From across the room, a voice laced with honey and poison cut through the chatter. Nathaniel Hawthorne, finally. Veronica Hale purred, sweeping toward him in a sequined gown that clung to every curve. Her manicured hand rested too easily on his arm. You've been hiding from me. Nathaniel forced a polite smile. Veronica. Her eyes flicked toward Emily, standing a step behind. A slow smirk curled her lips. And who is this? I wasn't aware you'd started sponsoring young artists from the streets. Emily's cheeks burned. She opened her mouth, but Nathaniel's voice was curt. This is Emily Parker, a guest in my home. Guest, Veronica echoed, laughter tinkling like glass. How generous of you. Though Nathaniel, one wonders, does she dine with you as well, or only decorate the place with her sketches? Emily's stomach twisted. Every glance around the room seemed to sharpen, whispers biting at her skin. She couldn't breathe. Without a word, she turned and fled toward the exit, heels clicking against marble until the sound was swallowed by the snow outside. The winter night wrapped around her like chains. Emily's thin shawl did little against the cold as she stumbled into the street. Tears stung her eyes, not from the wind but from humiliation. She had been foolish to think she could belong in Nathaniel's world even for a night. Emily. His voice cut through the storm. She froze. Nathaniel's tall figure emerged from the glow of the ballroom, coat whipping in the wind as he strode toward her. Emily, wait. She spun on him, fury mixing with shame. You shouldn't have brought me. I don't belong in your world, Nathaniel. You saw how they looked at me, like I'm some charity case you dragged in off the sidewalk. Nathaniel stopped a few feet away, chest heaving, breath clouding in the air. For once, his carefully controlled voice cracked. I don't care how they look at you. Emily shook her head, backing into the snow. But I do. I can't stand in a room where everyone waits for me to fail. I can't keep pretending I deserve a place in your perfect life. Her words hung between them, raw and unpolished. Nathaniel stared at her, and for the first time the man who ruled empires looked helpless. Snowflakes clung to her hair as she turned, walking into the storm. And Nathaniel, heart pounding in a way he hadn't felt in years, knew he had a choice. Let her disappear back into the shadows of the city, or fight to keep her in the light she had just begun to find again. He didn't hesitate. It began with a cough. At first, Emily thought it was nothing, just the winter air sneaking in through cracks in the night. Lucas had been fussier than usual, whimpering between restless sleep, but she told herself he'd be fine. He had to be fine. She had learned to live with fear, to bargain with it daily, but this time fear felt heavier. By dawn, the coughing had turned harsh, wheezing, each sound like a blade carving into her chest. When she touched Lucas's forehead, heat burned against her palm, too hot, far too hot. Her heart lurched. No, 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 she whispered, clutching him to her chest. Nathaniel was already in the hallway, tie loosened, briefcase in hand, when he heard her cry. He rushed into the room, eyes sharp. What's wrong? "It's Lucas," Emily stammered, voice shaking. "He's burning up." Nathaniel was at her side in 2 strides, his hand brushing the baby's cheek. He felt the heat instantly, his breath catching. The controlled calm he wore like armor shattered in that moment. "We're not wasting time." Within minutes, the Bentley was tearing through slush-covered streets, headlights cutting through sheets of snow. Emily sat in the back seat, rocking Lucas, whispering his name over and over as though the sound alone could tether him to this world. "Stay with me, baby, stay with me," she pleaded, tears streaking her face. Nathaniel drove like a man possessed, ignoring phone calls buzzing on the dashboard, ignoring the meeting he was supposed to lead that morning. For once, his empire could crumble. None of it mattered compared to the fragile boy gasping for breath in Emily's arms. At the hospital, fluorescent lights blazed too bright. Nurses rushed forward as soon as they saw Lucas's condition. Emily hesitated, panicked, when they tried to take him from her arms. "Please," she cried, holding tighter, "please don't take him away." One nurse spoke gently but firmly. "Ma'am, we need to get him on oxygen right now. You can come with us, but we need to move." Emily's knees wobbled. For one terrifying second, she thought she might collapse. Then Nathaniel's hand steadied her shoulder. "Go with them," he said, his voice deep, steady, grounding her in the chaos. She nodded through tears and followed the gurney down the hallway. Hours blurred together. Monitors beeped, machines hummed, and Emily sat hunched in a plastic chair, hands pressed together as if in prayer. Every few minutes she leaned forward to check the rise and fall of Lucas's tiny chest. Nathaniel was there, too, not in the detached way of a man doing his duty, but fully present. He refused to leave the hospital room even when his assistant called 3 times about an urgent contract signing. "Tell them I'm not coming," Nathaniel said flatly into the phone. "My family needs me." He hung up before the assistant could argue. Emily looked at him through bleary eyes, stunned. No one had ever put her needs above business, above convenience, above their own comfort. For so long, she had carried everything alone, convinced she wasn't worth anyone's sacrifice. And here was this man, this billionaire whose time was measured in millions, choosing to sit in a cold hospital room with her and a baby who wasn't even his. She couldn't stop the tears this time. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Nathaniel turned his gaze toward Lucas, whose tiny hand lay limp against the hospital blanket. "Because no one should face this alone." The words hit her harder than any cruel remark Veronica had ever spat. Emily pressed a trembling hand over her mouth, her whole body shivering as if her heart had been cracked open. For a long while, they sat in silence. Emily dozed in short, fitful bursts, and each time her head slumped forward, Nathaniel adjusted the blanket around her shoulders. Once she stirred awake to find his hand resting lightly against Lucas's crib, his head bowed, not in sleep, but in something closer to prayer. By the next evening, the fever began to break. Lucas's breathing steadied, color returned to his cheeks, and relief washed over Emily so fiercely she nearly collapsed to the floor in gratitude. She leaned against the crib, sobbing quietly, whispering thanks into his tiny ear. Nathaniel watched her, something unrecognizable stirring in his chest. He had seen strength before, in boardrooms, in hostile takeovers, in the sharp corners of ambition, but this was different. Emily's strength was born of love, carved by sacrifice, steady even when the world had given her every reason to fall. He found himself speaking without planning it. "You're stronger than you realize." Emily lifted her tear-stained face, eyes wide. "No, I'm just surviving." "No," Nathaniel said firmly. "Surviving is giving up everything but breath. What you've done is more. You've fought for him, for yourself. That's strength. For the first time, Emily didn't argue. She just held his gaze as though seeing him not as a billionaire in a suit, but as a man who understood the battles no one else could see. Late that night, when the monitors beeped softly and Lucas finally slept peacefully, Emily leaned back in her chair, exhaustion tugging her eyelids down. Nathaniel sat beside her, his coat draped over the chair, his sleeves rolled up. "You don't have to stay," she murmured, her voice slurred with fatigue. Nathaniel looked at her as if she'd said something absurd. "I'm not leaving." Emily's breath caught, her throat aching with unspoken words. She had lived her entire life with people who walked away the moment she became inconvenient. And now, for the first time, someone stayed. Sleep claimed her, but the tears on her cheeks glistened even as she dreamed. And Nathaniel Hawthorne, who had once sworn his heart would never open again, found himself watching her with something dangerously close to hope. The first weeks after Lucas's recovery passed in a haze of gratitude. Emily couldn't stop checking on him at night, pressing her ear close to his tiny chest just to hear the rhythm of his breathing. Each sigh was proof that she hadn't lost him, that maybe, just maybe, life wasn't determined to steal everything away. Nathaniel noticed. He always noticed. He didn't speak of the sleepless circles beneath her eyes or the way she sometimes froze, staring out the window as if afraid fate would come knocking again. Instead, he quietly ensured Lucas's formula was stocked. Emma had more sketchpads for Emily to borrow, and the sunroom always had fresh flowers. It was in that sunroom Emily came back to life. She began sketching Emma daily, capturing her climbing onto chairs, laughing at cartoons, chasing bubbles that drifted through the penthouse hallways. Soon the sketches became paintings, colors spilling across canvases like she'd never stopped. It was as though her hands had only been waiting for permission to remember. One evening, Nathaniel paused at the doorway and found her lost in her work. A smear of blue streaked her cheek, strands of hair falling from their bun. She was so focused she didn't notice him watching. And for the first time in years, he felt something stir, a quiet awe, the kind he hadn't felt since he first held Emma in his arms. "She's incredible, isn't she?" Nathaniel turned to find Mrs. Whitmore standing nearby, arms crossed. Her tone was grudging, but there was a glint in her eyes. Nathaniel's lips curved faintly. "Yes, she is." Weeks later, Emily nearly fainted when Nathaniel asked her to dress nicely one Friday afternoon. "Where are we going?" she asked nervously, smoothing the hem of her modest dress. "You'll see," Nathaniel said simply, holding the car door open. The Bentley rolled through Manhattan streets, neon lights flashing against the windows. Emily fidgeted in her seat, Lucas cradled in her arms. "If this is some kind of meeting, I don't think." "It's not business," Nathaniel interrupted. His tone was calm but unreadable. "It's something for you." Her brows furrowed. "For me." When the car finally stopped, Emily's breath caught. They were in front of a small but elegant art gallery tucked between boutiques on the Upper East Side. Its windows glowed with golden light, canvases visible inside. Above the door, a simple sign read, "Parker Studio and Gallery." Emily's knees nearly buckled. "Nathaniel, what is this?" He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "It's yours." She blinked rapidly, clutching Lucas tighter. "You can't be serious." "I bought the space," Nathaniel explained. "Renovated it, stocked it with supplies. All that was missing was you." Emily shook her head, overwhelmed. "Why would you do this? After everything, you hardly know me." Nathaniel's gaze held hers with quiet intensity. "I know enough. I know you've carried dreams no one else valued. I know you fought harder than most to protect your son, and I know the world deserves to see what you can create." Her throat closed. No one, not her parents, not Lucas's father, not anyone, had ever spoken to her like that. The opening night was surreal. Emily stood near the entrance, palms damp, watching strangers pause in front of her work. Each canvas felt like a confession. The loneliness of snow-swept benches, the warmth of Emma's laughter, the quiet terror of holding a feverish child. She had painted not just images but pieces of herself, and people were buying them. "Oh my God," whispered one woman in pearls. "The emotion in this piece, it's haunting. Who is the artist?" "Emily Parker," Nathaniel said smoothly from beside her, pride evident in his tone. Emily flushed, unable to meet his eyes. By the end of the night, nearly half her work had sold. Friends of Nathaniel's, collectors, even strangers from the neighborhood, all spoke of her talent, of how her art carried something raw, something real. Emily stood in the corner, overwhelmed. "This can't be happening," she murmured. Nathaniel approached, glass of champagne in hand. "Believe it, you earned this." Her voice shook. "I don't know how to thank you." He studied her, his expression unreadable. "You don't owe me thanks, Emily, just keep painting." As the crowd thinned, Emily found herself alone with Nathaniel by the window. Snow fell softly outside, blanketing the city streets. For a long moment neither spoke. Finally, Emily whispered, "You've given me more than anyone ever has, but I don't understand why me." Nathaniel's eyes softened, but a shadow lingered there. "Because helping you reminded me what it means to feel alive." The words hung heavy in the air, charged, unspoken meaning sparking between them. Emily's heart pounded. She saw the truth in his gaze, the closeness he didn't voice, the fear he didn't let slip. But then Veronica appeared in her mind with her cruel smile and venomous words. Emily stepped back, walls rising again. "You don't have to fix me, Nathaniel. I can stand on my own now." Nathaniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't push. "I know, that's what makes you extraordinary." Their eyes locked, an invisible tether neither dared to touch. The gallery lights reflected in Emily's tear-bright eyes, and Nathaniel's chest ached with something dangerously close to longing. And yet, between them stood the ghosts of his wife, her pride, her fear, and a world ready to tear apart anything that didn't fit its mold. For now, they let silence speak. Snow blanketed Manhattan again. Exactly 1 year after the night everything had changed. From the penthouse balcony, the city sparkled like 1,000 falling stars. But inside the Hawthorne home, the glow came from something far warmer. The grand living room had been transformed. Twinkling lights lined the windows, evergreen garlands framed the marble fireplace, and in the center stood a towering Christmas tree, decorated with ornaments chosen by small hands. Emma had insisted every bauble tell a story. Tiny frames with drawings Emily had made, a clay angel Lucas had smudged with paint, and at the very top, a silver star that shimmered when the firelight caught it. Emily stood back to admire it, her golden hair catching the glow. Lucas toddled unsteadily toward the tree, his little hands reaching for an ornament. "Careful, buddy," Nathaniel said, sweeping the boy up before disaster struck. He lifted him high into the air, making him squeal with laughter. "Not this one stays." Emily smiled, her heart aching with a sweetness she still struggled to believe was real. A year ago, she had been shivering on a bench, clutching her son like the last piece of her soul. Now she was here, warm, safe, surrounded by love that had not abandoned her. Emma skipped over with a sheet of paper in hand. "Look, Emily," she said, thrusting it forward. It was a drawing of 4 figures holding hands beneath a Christmas tree. That's you, that's Lucas, that's Daddy, and that's me. It's our family. Emily knelt, pulling the little girl into her arms. Her throat tightened as she whispered, "Yes, our family." Later that evening, neighbors dropped by, friends from Nathaniel's business circle, collectors who had discovered Emily's gallery, even Mrs. Whitmore's sister with a tin of gingerbread cookies. The penthouse hummed with laughter and music, but Emily noticed how Nathaniel stayed close, brushing her hand when she passed, meeting her eyes across the room as though silently promising, "You belong here." One of the guests, a gray-haired man who had once questioned Nathaniel's sanity for entangling himself with a homeless girl, approached Emily with a hesitant smile. "Your work, it's extraordinary," he admitted. "Raw, honest. My wife and I purchased 2 of your paintings. They remind us of what we nearly lost." Emily's eyes widened. She swallowed hard. "Thank you," she said, voice trembling with humility. Nathaniel watched from nearby, pride swelling in his chest. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. When the guests left and the fire burned low, the 4 of them settled on the rug. Emma leaned against Emily's shoulder. Lucas dozed in Nathaniel's arms, and the quiet hum of the city drifted in from beyond the glass walls. Nathaniel broke the silence. "Do you know what I used to believe?" he asked, his voice softer than Emily had ever heard it. She looked at him, curious. "What?" "That happiness was measured in acquisitions, in buildings with my name on them, in making sure the world remembered I was here." He shook his head slowly. "But none of it filled the empty places. Not until you." Emily's breath caught. Her fingers brushed the carpet nervously. "Nathaniel." He leaned closer, eyes locked on hers. "You showed me that family isn't blood or legacy, it's trust. It's choosing to stay when things get hard. You reminded me that love doesn't erase the pain, it makes surviving it worth something." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. For so long she had been terrified that the happiness she had found was fragile, that at any moment it would be pulled from her hands. But Nathaniel's words were steady, rooted deep. "I don't know if I deserve this," she whispered. Nathaniel reached out, tilting her chin gently until she met his gaze. "You deserve more than you've ever been given, and I intend to spend my life proving it." For a long moment they said nothing. Then quietly, Emily leaned forward, her lips meeting his in a kiss that was not rushed or desperate but filled with all the unspoken promises of the year they had survived together. Emma clapped suddenly, giggling. "I knew it. Daddy loves Emily." They both laughed through their tears, and Nathaniel pulled them all closer, Emma, Emily, and Lucas, holding them in an embrace that felt like the first true home any of them had known. The night ended with paintbrushes and laughter. Emma had insisted that instead of exchanging gifts, they paint memories of the year gone by. Emily painted Emma dancing in the snow. Emma drew Lucas with angel wings. Nathaniel painted a simple image of 4 figures standing beneath the Rockefeller tree, the moment their story had begun. When they finished, they placed the paintings beneath the Christmas tree like sacred offerings. Emily looked around the room, at Nathaniel's steady smile, Emma's joy, Lucas's gentle breathing, and for the first time she believed that love had not just found her but remade her. Happiness had nothing to do with penthouses or boardrooms, Emily realized. It wasn't found in status or wealth or applause. True happiness was in the warmth of small hands gripping yours, in the courage to let someone see your broken pieces, in the quiet promise, "I will not leave." That night, as snow fell softly over New York City, the Hawthorns, Nathaniel, Emily, Emma, and Lucas, became more than a family. They became proof that love, when given freely, could heal what the world tried to break. When I look back at this story, What strikes me most is how love doesn't always arrive in the way we expect. Sometimes, it comes disguised as responsibility or sacrifice, or a hand reaching out when you've convinced yourself you don't deserve one. What Nathaniel and Emily discovered was that wealth, status, or the weight of the past cannot compare to the simple, radical act of choosing to stay when it's easier to walk away. And maybe that's the lesson for us too. Happiness isn't about what we own, but about who we hold close. It's about being willing to carry someone else's burden and trusting them to carry ours when the time comes. So let me ask you, how often do we pass by people without seeing the story they are carrying? And if you were given the chance, would you choose to stay for someone who needed you, even when it cost you something? Thank you for spending these moments with me today. If this story touched your heart, I'd love for you to join our little community here. Just click the subscribe button below. It's free, and it means we can share more meaningful stories together. You are always welcome here.